So here we go, Kano, and I'm going to jump straight into Carlton as my first point. And I think everyone has been talking about Carlton. Everyone will talk about Carlton, but I want to look at it a different way. All right, so let's imagine that you watch that game in isolation, without any lead-in, without any knowledge of where the teams were, and I think that you would see that there was a great effort. Yeah, the great effort by both sides. I think it was a high-intensity game. Swans were a little cleaner than Carlton were, and Carlton's big fellas were wasteful. And so to hear Vossi after the game, he wasn't surprised to hear him talking about those elements that we saw and ignoring the big noise, but his big fellas in Mackay and Curnow just weren't able to get it done with their chances. I think Vossi was succinct after the game with the way that he broke the performance down. They played a side that lost the grand final last year after being clearly one of the two best teams in the competition in 2022.
They haven't been that this year, though.
No, they haven't, and neither have Carlton. So how far back do you want to do it when you come to expectations?
No, I understand, but with the injuries that Sydney have got, I don't think we can say because they were a grand finalist last year.
No.
And they're a quality side. They just beat North by 3 points the previous week.
Well, I'm with you, but the understanding of that both of those sides were desperate to win, and I thought the effort was commensurate with that from both. Carlton went inside 59 times, inside 50 to 52. The contested ball was largely even. There was, in terms of a coaching setup, they were set up pretty well to get what I thought that Swans were cleaner at ground level and took advantage of that in their own forward 50 to kick a few goals, and Carlton weren't. Swans, the small defenders, actually found themselves inside the small Carlton forwards for ground level, and they won too many of those contests. But largely, it comes down to the big fellas. Too many drop marks and too many missed shots on goal. Otherwise, they win that game of footy, and then all of a sudden they're starting to sort of ride it up a little bit. But the coaching isn't the issue. It's the best players not performing at their best, and at the moment, Harry Mackay's out of form, sadly. And it's really hurting the Carlton prospects.
Cripps has to take some responsibility with that as well. I mean, it's perhaps a little bit unfair, but that's what the best players get. They get targeted. There is now a belief that stop Cripps, stop Carlton, and the job that Isaac Henney did on him, firstly, terrific coaching from Longmire, who put an out-of-form player to a role and gave him a target, and he set himself for that target and got it done. But not the first time Cripps has been down on form when he's had extra attention this year.
Number two, I'm going to double down on intercept defenders. I spoke a little bit about Darcy Moore when I was talking about his game last week, but we saw another performance from an intercept defender in James Sicily in Hawthorn's great come-from-behind win against the Saints, and this is what he had to say about his standout performance on the weekend. In the best teams in modern football rely on intercept.
They're number
defenders.
one for you, aren't they?
They're
the most important.
I think the game is showing more and more. Like, you can have midfielders who win 30 touches. You can have forwards who, and then the strike forwards are the ones, the Toby Greens, the Jeremy Camerons, the Charlie Camerons that find a way, and now Isaac Rankin potentially, that find a way of making something from nothing. That's, to have that effectiveness in your front third. But I don't think that there's teams that are performing at their best without really strong intercept games in the back half, or say it's only a kick behind wherever the ball is. So right now, Collingwood have got it. They're without Jeremy Howe, but they're doing it with Darcy Moore and others. Hawthorn's better performances come off the back of a Sicily doing what he does. Port Adelaide, for all of their personnel issues, Aaliyah still wins big moments and turns what looks like defense into an attacking opportunity. And I think it's probably about the sides that are struggling as much as any. So Geelong have missed Koning for a long time, first game back. Radagale's been pretty good, but he hasn't been the same. So, and now he's going to be injured. So the intercept game, Tom Stewart has to play a little bit differently. I think that challenges them. May and Lever have been looked after by either tactics or by form or their form, and they haven't been able to generate their offense from what they normally get their offense from, which is that intercept marking. So Melbourne are a little bit flatter. Carlton they don't have an intercept game. McGovern has not been the player that they expected him to be. Wiedering's busy looking after the big dogs. Lewis Young, when they were playing their best football, he was in form, intercepting and pushing off, but that hasn't happened. West Coast have dropped off. McGovern used to be the barometer of it and brass in many ways, but they had to work as a tandem for that to be at its best. Western Bulldogs are doing it with just Liam Jones. Is that enough?
He took 10 intercept marks on the weekend,
which backs up what Darcy Moore did. So do they need a Western? Is that going to be enough for the Western Bulldogs? So I just. And then Sydney have, as we've said, without the McCartans there, they've sort of relied on. So Melican was in, Francis is in, Nick Blakey's playing. He's a rebound kicker of the footy, but he's not necessarily an intercept marker as such. So they've dropped off. So I just reckon it's a massive part of modern footy, and if you don't have it, you're on the back foot, and it's really hard to play winning footy. Number 3. Gold Coast and Port Adelaide playing for their coach, and I'm going to focus on Gold Coast for this little part. Stuart Dew would have been, it was accepted that this year would run out and that he would probably lose his job,
especially with the week that happened.
Well, yeah, correct. But the fact is that his team are digging in. They went up to Darwin. They've beaten a Western Bulldogs side who are in form, and they were pretty happy with the performance after the match. No, I'm here. The players are here for me. They've signed on because they're here for me. So his language is really positive. Their performances have been better. They play Adelaide up in Darwin, and they won both of their games in Darwin last year when I spoke about it potentially becoming a competitive advantage, a bit of a fortress for them. I'd love to see if they could get up there to play 3 or 4 or 5 games. It would make a bit of a difference. But they've beaten one of the form teams in the competition in Bulldogs. They play another form team in the competition in Adelaide. Can they lock down this growth that they've got? They're still behind the 8 ball. They're 5 and 6. They're not quite at 50-50, but they have responded. And I just think their players are playing for their coach, just as Port Adelaide are challenged playing for Kenny.
And that was Collins and Ballard behind the ball were excellent. Lukosius, of course. Rao was just enormous, and Humphrey through the midfield have really given them something.
They're finding layers, and I think that's the coaching challenge, and it is just to keep finding ways to challenge the opposition and to give yourself the best chance of winning, which you have to say the Gold Coast coaching group are doing at the moment. Number 4 is Luke Jackson. Now, I saw him obviously close up in the game, Fremantle versus Melbourne. I think it's a great way to judge a player on how he handles coming up against his old teammates, and his performance was excellent when the game needed Freo to stand up and to really challenge. His work in and around stoppages was great. His aerial work was great. I thought Luke Jackson really stood up for the Freo Dockers on the weekend.
You got these 2 A-grade ruckmen. You've spoken about where you see rucks in the game and their value. He is a ruckman. I mean, he's an okay forward and he's capable of providing a target. Darcy is not. Did we not just witness where he should be played every week? And is it an elephant in the room for them to try and work out how these two are going to work together?
Look, we could come back around to this. We'll keep this short, but you're pretty quick on that. I think that it depends how valuable they are as aerial threats in front of the ball, and not just as forwards, but running, being forward of it to create a contest for long down the lines to then speed up off. And I think Freo need that. Tracy's still a young player. Amos is showing signs and is going to be great and had a really strong game, especially in the big moments. But I still think they need a second, or they need another tall aerial target. So I think those two still work in tandem.
Okay.
It is a consideration on where you spend your money and what that is, but I think they could well be the best ruck duo going around over the next couple of years, because I do rate Sean Darcy as well. But it is it's a fair ask and it's a fair question, but it's pretty quick off the back of
but before the trade, you question that as well. Like before they targeted, we question what does it do for Sean Darcy, because he's a ruckman, he's not a forward.
Well, Darcy's been playing. He's come to hand. He's playing some of his better footy.
I'm not disagreeing with
that in the last 5 or 6 weeks. And Luke Jackson, after a slow start, has come on really well. My last one is actually projecting forward. I mean, I've been big on Adelaide, and obviously Collingwood are the form side at the moment, but Before I go to this projection, obviously the Adelaide win against Brisbane was huge, and Matty Nicks is, he deserves all sorts of credit for what he's been able to build over the last 3 or 4 years, and he's got a young group that are prepared to go the whole way with him. I am projecting. So we get to the other side of the buys, the 25th of June. I'm not sure exactly what round we're looking at there. We're looking at round 15. So on the 25th of June, Sunday at 1:10, Collingwood play Adelaide at the MCG. Both are off the bye the week before, so they're both rested and sharp. Rankin versus Quainer, Walker versus Moore, Keys v Dacos, Nick Dacos. I expect he'd get some attention there. Sloan v Mitchell or Adams, Myercheck v Murray, and Murray's not a headline act, but he'll be there and he'll be thereabouts. Yep. And I just love his attitude and his combativeness. Rochelle somewhere there versus Noble, Chris v Laird. The matchups will be everywhere. And at that point, depending what happens with Adelaide and Gold Coast this week, I'd expect Adelaide to be 8-5, Collingwood probably 11-1. I reckon we'll be looking at a top 4 matchup, and I for one looking forward to that in a month's time.
They should have moved that to the Friday night. Not sure that's even possible because it wasn't a rolling fixture until after round 15. But it's a shame. It's the early game on the Sunday, 1:10 MCG, Sunday the 25th of June. Put that in your calendars. If you're new to this, we go through all of the games. And we pose a simple question. Who does it speak volumes about? The result, Bucks Friday night. We've touched on it, and you certainly did it with the Buck stops here. Sydney beat Carlton by 26 points.
Well, neither really. Neither. But I'm going to go with Sydney. Like they had a lot out. I thought their tackling intent in particular, to begin the match, and they turned it into a Sydney-type game, which is heavily contested. They were able to get back and they supported their defence really well, and they were cleaner and harder in the little circle, in around 5 metres from the contest. And I thought, they deserved their win. Carlton probably kicked themselves out of it, but Sydney, for mine, did enough on the night for them to get the result and take their next step because they've still got a long way to go. St Kilda and Hawthorn speaks volumes of who.
Yeah, it's another good one because I'd love to say the Hawks because I do like what they're building. But let's go with the Saints because, they've been found out, haven't they? Their last month has been really ordinary. They beat North, lose to Adelaide, which was their worst performance of the year, beat GWS, and then lose to Hawthorn after having a 20-point lead deep into that game. They conceded about 80 more disposals from the Hawks, the inside 50s, 58 to 43 and 28 scoring shots, and they got them on the outside, Hawthorn. So it was a terrific performance from Sam Mitchell, but Saints don't quite have enough talent in their lineup, and when the system breaks down as it did, they get exposed badly. So they'll head into the bye, and their season is at somewhat of a crossroads. Let's get to the next game, which would have been the Saturday game.
Naarm and Wallyallup.
That's it. What does it say more about?
I actually obviously got to this game in the Wallyallup coach's box, and I'm going to go with Freo. I think that they've won their last 4 in a row. They're now on the positive side of the ledger at 6-5 for the year. Yeah, they won 15 games of footy last year at their 22. So and they were just shy of the top 4, finished 5th on the ladder. So we know that their best is pretty good. They've turned over Lobb, they've turned over Logue, they've turned over Mundy, who they were loath to lose because his experience is hard to replace. But they're asking a lot of young players now to come in and fill what was a loss of around 20% of their matches played experience on their list, which is 1/5 of your experience going out is a little bit. It's difficult to replace, but they've got a little bit of momentum now. They've come up against the Melbourne, so they had more inside 50s. They were able to defend that. Fremantle's efficiency going inside forward 50 has been an issue, but they kicked 12 goals from limited insides 52 for the total of the game, and they've got a forward line that are having a crack. And the young Jai Amos, who kicked 2 goals in the last quarter for a tally of 3 for the game, stood up when they needed to. So I thought that was a really strong performance. There's questions of Naarm or Melbourne, but Freo going into the bye go in with momentum. Geelong and GWS.
says more about Geelong, and if they lose the aura of the home ground advantage, then that's going to be significant. So the Giants have a good record there. They just out-hunted them. They forced them into panic, really, and that's what they did. They came in with a plan. There was nothing pretty about it, but it was an Adelaide style of performance, I thought, from the Giants. So huge credit to Adam Kingsley for what he delivered and for his players to be able to execute. But for the Cats, I mean, they're a bit confused. I've never seen him throw the magnets around like this, Chris Scott. The coning forward is bizarre. He looked to be the centre-half back for the next 10 years in this competition, the footy that he played last year, and he would have been in the top 2 or 3 players that I would have handpicked to have in my side. I know there's been injury, but he shouldn't be playing forward. You've got Henry, you've got Hawkins, you've got Cameron, and they put de Koning forward. That was bizarre. Both Henry brothers were at one end, then they were at the other. The midfield, I understand he's doing things because of personnel, but Stengel playing on ball is interesting. So they just look a bit panicked to me, the Cats, and full credit for the Giants in doing that. Gold Coast had a terrific win against the Bulldogs in Darwin. Yeah,
I'm going to go with the Suns. The Western Bulldogs still, came to play, performed pretty well, had 66 inside 50s to 48, the Dogs, so they had plenty of supply. But for Gold Coast to be able to hang tough, stick fat, and to be able to grind out that win was a really strong performance. Plus 17 in contested ball, which is part of their DNA. When you look at the big bodied midfielders they've got, in particular Rao, who played a really strong game. But Lukosius hitting the scoreboard with 5 is good. He becomes a really good foil for Ben King, but maybe Ben King's the foil for Lukosius as we go forward. And we've spoken about Humphrey, but that was great. It's in their environment too. They've played games up in Darwin. I think you saw the Bulldogs players with sweatbands on, and it is a different challenge playing in that climate and that environment. And we'll find out how they go against the Crows this weekend up in Darwin again. West Coast Eagles were well defeated by Essendon over at Optus.
Well, I've banned talking about West Coast, so we'll go with Essendon and just the opportunity that presents themselves this year. They play finals from here. There's not an excuse not to from here. The win against Richmond was huge. Then they had West Coast win that comfortably. North Melbourne this week and Carlton, who is very gettable clearly at the MCG before the bye. So the prospect of them winning 4 in a row with still games to come against North and West Coast after the bye, and GWS as well. They have the most favourable draw in the competition, and they should look to maximise that this year with finals footy. We were both at the MCG yesterday to see Port Adelaide win in another tight one against the Tigers.
Yeah, Yada Balti, and that's who I'm going for. Their 5th win by 10 points or less for the year. And I just think it speaks to how committed, or how Ken has his group, just understanding the moments, and they just grind through the key parts of the game. They don't beat themselves, and not beating yourself is a really good way to play winning football. I think they take away and disarm the opposition. They take away the strengths of the opposition really well. I think the Port Adelaide coaching group has always been big on that. And I just, Ollie Lord in front of the ball doesn't have to do a lot, but he competes and he has a crack. Pau Pepper's been fantastic. And then, of course, Butters and Rosie. And Horn Francis was strong again. And what impresses me is the off-ball running that he's doing.
He's improved in that area.
Yeah, he's covering the ground a lot better. He obviously is being rewarded for some of this stuff that isn't as sexy, that isn't as just kicks, marks, and handballs, and that's good coaching, and it speaks to a good environment, a good culture. So I think Yada Balti yesterday would be the one that it speaks volumes about for me, despite the fact that Richmond were quite plucky in the way they went about it. Collingwood expected to win against North and got the job done.
Well, let's give North a little bit of credit, even though they've lost 9 in a row, and it's been tough going for them. But in the last 2 weeks, the effort is there. So to match Collingwood around the contest, around stoppage, to have your moments going inside 50, and they play some good footy where you can walk away and go, okay, I can see that coming together. Will Phillips probably played his best game for the club. Larky's just having an enormous season. He's having a huge, considering where they are at, we probably need to start giving him and Oscar Allen a bit more credit than what we have for what they are producing in a really tough season. So let's go with North. And in the last 2 weeks, their effort has been much more in line with what you would expect from a team that doesn't have the talent. We get that, but need to play on effort, and they've at least done that. Adelaide are in a pretty good position, despite an inconsistent win-loss season, Bucks, but they beat a red-hot Brisbane yesterday.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Adelaide, and they didn't win top of the ground. Brisbane had the game on their favour for a large part of it, and you know, in many ways, as Chris Fagan said, they felt like they kicked it away. So, you know, Brisbane could have got the result, but Adelaide just found enough in the key moments. They're really consistent with their scoring. They've got so many scoring threats. I think they've got some really hard workers through the middle of the field. Keys' job on Neil in particular early was an important aspect. You know, Laird's a workhorse. Sloane's a workhorse. They're all courageous to have a crack. Young Pedler is a guy that, you know, you look like you're going to be able to build you know, a mid-forward group around his sort of energy and effort. He didn't have a lot of the ball, but he seems to have that toughness and then the capacity to finish as well. So I really like what Adelaide are doing, and all credit to them. It's been a steady build, and they've got they look like they've got plenty of weapons, but yeah, that was impressive.